Okay, so welcome again. And we're going to start with our check-ins in the chat. So the check-in question is, what are you bringing in terms of questions and curiosities about source keeping, about what is source keeping? We have been already um, discussing or learning about this for when did I start this? I think it was before March for sure, maybe February. Hello, Rebecca. Have a haircut. And yeah, we have been already in a learning journey here, and today we are interviewing Nick Shore. I'm co-hosting this with Cheryl and Ria. And first, I want to see what's alive for you. What questions are you bringing today? What are you curious about? So you can check in the chat. So Andres is asking, what is masculine source keeping? How does the we represented in you relates to the emerging field? What role for art in source keeping? How do we source art? Can we imagine some collective source keeping not held by one person, but by a little group of people? How do we rigorously study and evaluate the efficacy and trustworthiness of source keeping? What wants to come forth in collective presence now from the middle? What new energies want to come in and through us? What is being sourced? What were your early experiences around connecting with source keeping? What are the principles and obligations related to assisting another person in stewarding their creative call issuing from source? I'm feeling the field getting denser. These questions have gravity. How can I personally begin to keep more source? Mm. Mm. Thank you all. So I'm gonna invite us to be camera off, except Nick. And there's one more. How will you go about finding that thing, the nature of which is totally unknown to you? What is the role of humility in your source keeping? Okay, so I'll start with Nick here. How are you, Nick? How are you arriving today?
I'm okay, thanks. I'm a bit, I'm a bit like still. I just arrived in Berlin last night late, so it's my first day in Berlin. So, but I'm on European time, so I'm just a bit. I'm a bit acclimating to the energy of this city, which is quite intense. It's quite intense. It's like being. It's like living in a Kandinsky painting or something. Being in Berlin, it's quite intense energy.
Hmm. Yeah. Hmm. So I'm gonna start with the same question that I asked everyone, which is, what is source keeping to you?
Mm. Mm. Yeah. So I just want to say it's nice to be here, and thank you for um, asking for me to be interviewed. And I also appreciate all those questions as well. It's interesting how, as you said, I could feel it too, that how the questions impacted the space. Just every question was sort of like building something, some sort of soup in the space like that. It was interesting to feel all that. So I did I did think a little. Well, first let me say this first of all, which is anything I say about this is I don't claim in any way to have any kind of expert knowledge about this or right correctness about this or anything like that. I'm only going to speak from, to the best of my ability, from my own personal experience of it and my own like anecdotes and what I've come across like that. That's all I can talk about. I've never studied it. I don't know any. I've never been taught it. I don't have any academic background in it. I've got no professional expertise in it. So I'm just saying stuff that I have experienced in my own life, and then take whatever's useful and or resonates and ignore what isn't. I don't claim it's true for anybody else or right or in any way. Um, Source keeping, and let me say this as well. I just want to say a couple. I did take notes actually before this call, just only 10 minutes before, but I wanted to remember to say a few things. So I'm not speaking emergently now. I'm speaking from notes that I made 10 minutes ago. So I want to say something, and a couple of these things I'm going to say sound a bit like I know I recognize before I say this that I sound a bit like a management theory kind of guy, like I've been to Harvard Business School or something when I say it this way, but you'll see why I'm saying it this way. Is one thing I've noticed about like leadership theory over time is when a new theory of leadership emerges, there's a feeling when the literature first comes out in academic journals that it's this special thing that only a few people can do. So they often point at the sort of first 20 people who've led from these new principles. Like I remember when level 5 leadership was all that everyone was talking about level 5 and teal leadership and all these things like that, ways of leading things, starting things and leading things. And it always sounds in the beginning like this is this rarefied thing that only these few talented people can do. And then later, when the literature emerges and the field emerges around that particular style of leadership, it becomes apparent in the literature when you read it that everybody can do it. Just some people can do it earlier than others, and some people are just more naturally talented at it than others. But again, that's true for anything. Like it's like playing the piano. Like anybody can play the piano, but not everybody can be concert pianist. You know what I mean? And I think source keeping is a bit like that. It's like, I think we're catching source keeping at a time in its movement through culture and the zeitgeist when it's quite new as a term, and it's got all this pixie dust around it, like source keeping. Like somebody can be a source keeper, and it's like you're anointed as a source keeper, and this person does and this person can't. And I think that's a phase, actually, and I think that'll change. And I think in another 10 years, it'll be like brainstorming used to be. It used to be like only creative people know how to do brainstorming. I think in the future it'll be like, no, everyone knows how to source keep. Some people are really amazing at it, have incredible access like that. Some people practice much more than others. Other people got access to that and do it sometimes in meetings and when they need it like that. So I'm just saying, like, how I'm holding the whole idea of source keeping before I get into what it is I think it's quite an early stage, and it's quite you could say a bit of a trendy term at the moment, and I think it'll change quite a lot, actually. And I think it'll spread because I think it's interesting. It's an interesting way of thinking about starting and leading things. That's quite new terminology and some new ideas underneath it that will spread because they're good, because they're evolving. I first heard the term in 2001, and I heard it from Pamela, who some of you know, and I heard it in the context of the Nordic Women's Gathering. So she is one of the 2 or 3 source keepers. She didn't initiate that field, but she's now one of the source keepers of the field of Nordic Women's Gathering, which is an ongoing field of women from Scandinavia that meet and discuss individual and group development stuff and sort of feminine leadership and feminine power. So she introduced me to the term in 2001. I never heard it before, so I have to credit her with that. And she's the first person I ever asked, what is it? Like, what is it? So I have to just say credit where it's due, is the first person who ever told me that, or I said anything about it, or explained anything, was her in the context of Nordic Women's Gathering. And I think that was quite exciting to me. I actually interviewed her. I've got that YouTube video somewhere when I did it, because I thought it was really interesting, because I've studied teal leadership, and I was like, oh, that's interesting. It dovetails in to like some of the management stuff I've been reading about new forms of leadership and leading from source, and how to like be the chief source keeper, chief sensing officer. They talk about this, the new CEO is the new chief sensing officer. And I was like, oh, it's interesting that those 2 things are coming together like that. So Pamela's who said it to me first. So I've thought about it quite a lot since 2021, I'm sorry, 21. So I'm going to, and then I'll get a little bit deeper into what it is to me, but I also want to say some things like this as well, is I think when you look at a guy like Steve Jobs and the way he started Apple, the company Apple, and led that corporation, I would think of him as a very real world masculine source keeper. Whatever you think of him or whatever you think of Apple, that human being sourced the idea for that company and remained its source keeper and source of directionality and wisdom for his entire life, and gave his entire life to that. And that company came from a very deep point inside him through into something much bigger than that. And for better or worse, it also contains all of his shadow. It also contains all of his dark side, and it contains his brilliance, and it contains something that feels transcendent to one individual as well, like that. So I do think that, I'm not saying CEOs are source keepers. I'm just saying, like, when I look at things like that, I'm also like, yeah, wow, look what it looks like when somebody pulls a whole organization that affects the planet through from somewhere in the sort of creative sphere and actualizes it. It's quite interesting to look at it like that. That's not a 12-person retreat for a week. That's an entire $1 trillion global corporation that came through somebody's capacity to hold that and influence its culture and everything and hold the sort of aesthetic culture and everything like that. And I don't think it was just from ego. I think he was doing something that was transcendent of ego. There's a book by Elizabeth Gilbert, which some of you might have read, called Big Magic, which is about the creative process. She's the woman that wrote Eat, Pray, Love, and a bunch of others. She's quite a good writer as well, but more serious fiction. And she talks about like the artistic process and how ideas for stories and paintings and movies and float through the field, and they're looking for the person that has their name on them like that. They're looking for the artist who is the one that will actualize that idea. And sometimes they're like, they find the artist and the artist says no, and so they go find another artist, and this artist goes, wow, it's amazing, I had that idea last week, and that person went and executed it, like that, but I just decided not to execute it. And now somebody else told the same story, and it's like, I thought of that story 2 weeks ago, and now somebody else just wrote it, like that. And I used to work in Hollywood, and you see that all the time, where people are like, ah, oh, damn it, I had that whole plot in my mind and I just didn't bother to write it down, and now somebody made the movie. Like 2 weeks later, somebody actually submitted a script like that. So I think there's lots of energy, and creative projects and creative things trying to come into being from the creative field of the future, potential quantum creative field, all the time. And they're looking for individuals or groups of individuals to do them, to bring them into it. The only way an idea that's etheric can come into being is through people. I suppose it can come in through animals, I suppose, but we know what that looks like. But like the sorts of projects we're talking about, it needs humans to enact them. So there's all this energy floating around trying to come into being, and it's looking for people. And so, and it through resonance, I think those projects and ideas and stories and things, they know what it feels like. They know, those energies know what it feels like to resonate with a human or a group of humans, and they go like that. And they're coming in, they're trying to come through like that. Either it's, and I think in the old paradigm, a lot of artists, and shaman and people were leaning over the edge into the quantum field like that, and they were trying to catch the idea that I got their name on it, like, and then you watch people like Jackson Pollock working, and you're less like, that guy's got the spirit, man. Something hit that guy from, or whoever, Picasso, and it's like something spiritual's happening there. He or she is pulling in something that's got their name on it. They're channeling something creative through like that. So I don't think it's like source keeping itself is new, like humans couldn't do it before and now they can. I think it's more like the capacity of the quantum field to come through and materialize itself has always been true, is always true forever. And it's just like how the human capacity to do it and to sense it and to pull it through, it's just shifting all the time because it's always evolving. Every time a new project, that's just evolution, repression. Every time a new project happens and a new group of people do something or catch something, it just, the whole way of doing it sort of increases like that, capacity increases. So I think what we're talking about is we're talking about a capacity to do that that's on the edge of the human capacity to do that, which has been around for a long, long time and in many different flavors, all the way from Steve Jobs to Picasso to back in history. I'm sure people were doing that in villages 1,000 years ago. So there's like that. It's just like on the leading edge of it, leading edge meaning evolutionary creative front of it like that. It's always changing shape, and its shape right now is the shape where it's like, oh, source keeping. We're calling it that. We're giving it that name like that. And I think it's really, to me personally, it's very similar in my body, in my psyche and soma, to the creative impulse. It's very, very similar. It's sometimes indistinguishable from the creative impulse. So I have no idea for what to paint. I'm sitting looking at a blank sheet of paper. Maybe I've got a question or something I'm working out like that. And I let go and I drop in and And sometimes I see something, just don't know why, and then try to render it on paper. Sometimes I just start making marks and realize what it is that I'm drawing over time. I don't even know what it is. It goes backwards and forwards between those two, but it's a letting go into something, some kind of question or some general something, and then something coming forward through like that is a creative process to me. I think that's true for dancers or painters or anybody that does anything creative at all. And creativity is everything from cooking to, in so many forms of creativity, to debating, to anything. So I think source keeping's got quite a lot of source connecting. Let me say source connecting versus keeping. Source connecting is in me, has got a lot to do with the way I experience the creative process. Similar like that. Someone's unmuted. No, okay. Looks like it's Rachel who's unmuted. Thanks. So where was I? Yeah. So then I think so, like, if you just got a, if you don't really, if you're an artist, let's say, and you don't really have a question and you just got a blank canvas, you're just opening up like that, and then stuff comes through, and who knows, like what's that about that comes through? Maybe you're lucky and you make something that's important or interesting, maybe you don't. So I think that's like a general thing of like opening to the idea of some kind of energy or force field or creative potential or something that, let's call it source, like that, and trying to make oneself available for something to come through like that. But that's very wide. That's just going to source like that. So then there's things that start to get more nuanced than that, in my experience, which is which of these ideas that's floating through, like Liz Gilbert was saying, which of these stories that are floating through are mine to tell. If you're a scriptwriter, you don't pick the wrong story to tell, even if you have a good idea, because it takes a year to write a good screenplay. You can waste a year writing the wrong screenplay that wasn't really yours. You could be like, that's a brilliant idea, I should write it, and you're halfway through and you're like, actually, this is somebody else's story to write, not mine, and you've wasted 6 months. So like being discerning about what's mine and what's not mine, of all this stuff that's floating to do or to source into, what's really got my name on it, is another aspect of it, because there's so much out there in the field of the future looking for humans to come in through, that you can pick the wrong thing easily. So really starting to be like, what's mine? And how do I know that? I know that I don't know that always. I've made a lot of mistakes in that area, but it's somewhere, for me, it's like excitement, feeling alive around it, feeling a little bit nervous around it, feeling horny around it, feeling like I can see it, feeling like I want that to exist in the world, feeling a kind of like impatience in myself. I have to make the thing, I've heard it described, the thing you can't not do. It doesn't always have to feel that way, like that way. That's a bit strict to me, like that. But I've got a certain kind of energy where I'm almost like it already exists. I just like that. And I get sort of ants in my pants, like that kind of feeling. And I take that as meaningful. I take that as like, it's probably, and then sensing a bit more. Is it really mine? Is it really mine? Leave it a few days. Is it still there? Is it still there, bugging me like that? Or was that a passive? Because I've had ideas that I've been obsessed with for 2 days. And then on day 3, I'm like, nah, don't want to do that. I'm bored of that idea now. So just let it percolate. And if it's still there in a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks, like, it's knocking on my door. But that's still not really source keeping. That's sourcing and trying to work out, that's going into source and then trying to work out what of that is mine and what's somebody else's or just noise or whatever. Just because it's from source, it doesn't mean it's mine or even that it's good. I don't know. Source creates all kinds of junk, I'm sure, you know what I mean? Everything's from source. So, fascism is from source. So I don't know what to make of that, but that's a different conversation. But so then it's like, creatively, what's mine to do? Is it really mine to do? Do I really have energy for it? I said before, like, don't decide to build a cathedral if you don't want to build a cathedral, because it's a lot of work. You know what I mean? It's like, I have to build this thing, and then you start figuring out how to dig sewage, and you're like, I don't really have the energy for that. So I've got what it takes to do it, the capacity and the desire and the, resources, and can I really? And then source keeping, the question source keeping is then it's staying with it. That's got to do with staying with it no matter what. And then you marrying your idea. You're in a monogamous relationship with your idea, and you've made a commitment not to get divorced from your idea to the best of your ability, unless it's really damaging to others, and like the kids, and which it can be. And that's a hell of a commitment. Once you say yes to that, then you are the keeper of that flame. And whatever that idea is trying to manifest through you, once you make that commitment to it, it will take you and it will do its will with you no matter what. And even if that feels like it's trying to kill you to have itself be executed, you've signed up for that once you make that commitment. And it's not until you really say source keep that you're crossing that threshold. I think sourcing ideas are 10 a penny, but once you're like, I'm going to bring this into the world, I'm going to give birth to this thing. Once you allow yourself to get pregnant with an idea, then it's fucking coming, whether you like it or not. You know what I mean? It's coming. And that, it's just, I mean, I guess it's in many ways like birth. It's sort of like it's a bit touch and go. It's life and death. You put yourself into quite a complicated situation, is my experience. And then you're into once you've decided to do that, then you're into much more complicated real world stuff when you decide to source keep something real. And I just want to touch on two of those things for a minute. And there's many complicated things, but I want to touch on two. And the first I want to touch on is power. So you are, in a way, putting yourself in a position of what could be called power by saying, I am the source keeper of this idea. And you're not at the same time. And I don't believe that as people, as humans yet, we're really particularly skilled, any of us, at holding that kind of a position well. Because is it really source or is it me? Is it really power that's anointed onto me by my proximity to source, so-called, or is it actually me taking power because I want that to happen, or I believe that's right and that others are wrong, or whatever it may be, I don't know. But there's a very complicated relationship between source keeping and power that I don't think we've sorted out yet. I believe that source keeping can be done very cleanly and clearly and very sovereignly. I believe that. And I believe that that capacity is a frontier of human development to be able to do that well, and that we're all struggling with it at the moment. All of us, everybody I've encountered at all that's called themselves a source keeper, including me, wrestle with that. Like, how do I hold this, the power that's conferred on that idea? How do I hold it well and not abuse it, but actually use it for the good and and not shy away from it also, because power's scary and it's like, no, let's vote on this and let's turn it into a kind of flat hierarchy. And it's like, no, it's actually, when you say yes to source keeping, you're saying yes to something that is powerful, but at the same time, got to be really careful about that. So I want to say that. And the second thing, so that's one place where I think we've got a lot of work to do, all of us. I'll speak for myself, I do. And then, in my humble opinion, of many of the examples I've seen around me, that's a place where it can get super tricky and complicated. And the other thing is something nuanced to do with masculine and feminine in this as well, because usually one of the ways of trying to keep yourself honest is you don't source keep alone. You have co-hosts or you have collaborators that are to use CP language. You make sure you've got one or two or maybe more co-hosts and maybe a wider circle of wisdom around you to do it, keep you honest and keep checking you on it. I mean, it's absolutely essential to have people to continually say to you, are you sure it's from source? Like that, really? Are you sure? And like, it's essential. But those configurations of people usually contain men and women, both, certainly in the ones that I've been part of. And so when you've got power and you've got men and women and you've got leadership and you've got who's on first base, who's the source keeper, the co-host, and all those configurations are changing like that all the time. And it's sometimes the same people across different projects. Navigating the complexity of that and the different ways that different wounding and shadows and cultural stuff and that gets brought into that is really hard. Is really hard, I think, and really. But I believe in the principle of source keeping. I believe in the principle of trying to move forward more and more from a place that's aligned with what the evolutionary impulse is trying to have come through people. And so I believe that the work is good work to try and go through these mistakes and these crashes. Like the Wright brothers figured out how to fly because they crashed 10 times more than anybody else. That's how they did it. And they analyzed their crash data every time. So that's how you learn to fly, is you crash a lot. So we're just crashing all over the place, and that's good. And the more times we can crash, the better. It's painful as shit. I mean, we're those pilots that are smashing into walls all over the place trying to work out how to fly. That's what I think we are. That's where we are in this question. But it's like navigating all that. I know I'm talking a lot, but I have notes. But it's my time, so. And I've got one more thing to say. Yeah. Okay. So one more nuance I want to say as well, which I've noticed and I wrote down, is I think there's two different things going on as well. In the beginning, when you're trying to source a project itself, so there's no project, sourcing, and then there's a project. It's like, it's mine, like that. That's, you could say in this language, that's the project landing on you from source, in a perfect world, let's say it really is from source. That's source of something out there, and it come out there, whatever, I don't know, in a non-dual framework, I don't know what out there even means, but there's a sort of field, and you're like, oh, it's mine. And then there's the project's live and you're source keeping it. Then you're not just connecting generically out to source all the time like that. I don't think it's quite the same. You're connecting through the project to source. So there's another layer. So the project has a life of its own, a soul, you could say. So it's you as source keeper, there's the project, and then the source behind like that. And so it's like not just what does source want, it's like what does source want in its relationship to the soul of this project, of which I am the source keeper, like that. So there's a whole cascade of things happening then once the project starts to get live. And the project itself has a life of its own, independent of the source keeper. And one of the things that's happening here is the relationship between the energy of the project and the individual source keeper as well, and then the source here like that. So that getting all that into alignment as well, I think is more complicated than just let me have a good idea from source for a project like that. It's also like each decision has to go through this sort of framework of like, is it lined up all the way like that? And let's not move until it is. So there's some things in my experience. I think that's it. I think that's all I want to say for this minute, and then I could say some more. I can talk. I'm going to stop, but I can talk more about. I know people want to be like, what's masculine source keeping? I can talk more about that in a bit if you want. Yeah, stick down. Ask me another question. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, thank you. One thing thank you for laying it out so um didactically. Um, like I was, yeah, I felt like it really resonates with also my experience of, and it's nice that you gave like a overview of where we are collectively also. Um, the thing that I was curious about was the, because I think it's no coincidence that today is kind of like 1 year ago we were in Berlin together starting Participation Mistake. And I think it's, yeah, I think it's no coincidence that today we are doing this interview, and I'm very present with that field in my awareness. And you and Cheryl are in Berlin, and I've like with you talking, I've started to remember about the big vision that was coming through when this project started to unfold. And it felt like something bigger than all of us, that was wanting to really take all of our energy and move something. So I'm curious to hear from you, because I think you were also always bringing that in as like, this is like, when you see in history like artistic movements where there was like a group of pioneers. I don't know if that's true in our case. Sometimes I think it's a little bit delusional of me to think that, but somehow I wonder if there's something really wanting. Yeah, what is your thoughts on that? Like, what is source trying to manifest through these groups that you're seeing? Like, what do you see? What is your vision?
Just to clarify, Amanda, do you mean specifically Participation Mystique, or do you mean more generally?
Like the thing, like I'm referring to the thing in Participation Mistake that really caught your attention, and then that is maybe present in other projects, but it was really present in that project. And yeah.
I'll answer that Participation Mystique first, and then I'll try and see if it generalizes, because there's some quite specific things about, I'll keep saying PM just because it's easier, PM, Participation Mystique, the Berlin gathering we did last year. I'll say that, and then I'll see if it scales. and just for anybody that doesn't know, Participation Mystique was the source keeper of that was Cheryl. Me and a guy called Nathan Vanderpool were co-hosts. Cheryl asked us to be co-hosts. There were, I think, 12 of us, and we were living in a house together on the outskirts of Berlin for, I think, 10 days or something like that. We did some 10 weeks of pre-building on Zoom and 10 weeks of integration afterwards, but it was a 10-day period in a house together. And we were making art, we were building field together, doing intersubjective creative rituals, building field, and then making art from what we call the artist in the middle, the sort of energy that emerged in the we space between us in the social field. But we were using emergent ritualistic creative practices that were emerging in real time in the gathering itself as ways to hold the different circles. It was quite energized. It was quite exhilarating to be in something that was really creatively on the emergent edge. I mean, it felt like it was emerging in real time in front of us. It was like watching a baby be born again and again and again. It was like 100 babies that just kept coming like that, in real time, the whole time we were there. What I felt Cheryl had nailed when I could feel it, and it also clicked with my own seeing for the couple of years before, which was something like this. Is, I guess if I just say it as simply as I can, is like I felt quite strongly that there's these big new energies in consciousness, in creativity, on evolutionary edge of consciousness. I believe consciousness is trying to come in to reality all the time, like waves on a beach. It's trying to constantly make its way into reality like that. And sometimes it moves in slowly, and sometimes it moves in, it's wave form, I think, like that. Sometimes there's big upswings. And if you look back in history, you can see these big movements like the Enlightenment period when consciousness lifts, and then sometimes it drops. So I feel like there's a big one coming through at the moment. It feels quite axial to me. And I felt like group intersubjective practice mixed with creativity and art would be a very interesting way to try and catch what's trying to come through the field onto paper. Not literally, everything has to be a painting, but me and Cheryl kept talking about sacred blueprinting. We kept being like, there's these energies trying to come through like this. And wouldn't it be interesting if you could actually, rather than just feel and say, I've got the feels about these energies, to say, like, what is it? And can we write it down on paper? Can we see it? Can we look at it? Can we blueprint it? Can we see what's actually trying to make itself manifest through these big, powerful energies, rather than just waste all this creative energy? Let's try and capture it, even if just as creativity, but maybe more. Maybe we'll see something in blueprint form like that. And so I was very curious about that. And that was one thing that I felt like Cheryl really and I were very aligned when she talked to me about PM in the beginning. I was like, yep, we're on the same wavelength. Totally, I get that. And then I also felt, and I think I could feel it in Cheryl's field, that this was also true for her, was that I think shamans, like, I don't know, I'm not a shaman, I'm not trained to be one, but I've met some. And I think their capacity sometimes is that they can lean right over through reality, through the veil, and look into non-ordinary spaces and see stuff that's coming. I think they can, so they don't have to wait for reality. They don't have to wait for those blueprints. They can actually lean through into the quantum field and look and see what's trying to, like that. And so I felt like at very high frequencies, you can look through like that and the veil. And so I was like, I think what artists, because I'm an artist, I think sometimes when you're really in a heightened artistic state, you're looking through into the field of the future. You're kind of leaning over the edge. And I know what that feels like. And you just look in and you see it and you're like, oh, fuck, it's that. And then you try and pull it back like that. So I thought, maybe we could have a collective veil piercing experience, or some way of seeing through like that. That's interesting like that. So those two things felt super exciting. I was horny for that. I mean, super horny for that. I was like, yeah, like I have to have that experience. That has to happen. We have to make that happen by hook or by crook. And so I was like, I'll support you in any way I can. And yeah, there were many, 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 many things going on with PM that it was an amazing experience, but in many, many ways. It's too many to mention. And I've written probably 50 pages of stuff about, if anybody's interested. I've written it all down, what I learned and some of my experiences, if anybody's interested. But I was attracted to those possibilities, and they resonated with me. Yeah. I've got one more thing to say about being here now. Is, yeah, it's funny following Eros. Following Eros is one of those things that sort of, it's a clue to where's the source. What source trying to tell you is like when we got Eros for it. Is, why am I in Berlin? I have no idea why I'm in Berlin. I don't know what the strange attractor is that brought me here. I could pretend that I do, but I don't. But in this conversation now, I'm realizing, of course, it's PM that brought me to, is the field itself of that gathering that brought me here. That's the magnetic thing that I was moving towards. But right now, I'm just like an elephant, feeling like maybe water is to the south, but I've got no idea. You know what I mean? I don't know why I'm here. Now I do. Now you asked me that question.
Thank you. Yeah. I would have more questions, but I think I'm gonna open to Cheryl and Ria to jump in now. And if you have any questions.
I know it is waiting for Ria, but maybe I'll ask a question. It's very, I think it showed up in my question that I put into the chat as well. But there's something that's been very important to me around like what translation, like really, really good translation of what's happening here. Like this kind of source keeping work, this way in which we're catching, we're like allowing our bodies, like individually and also collectively, like in the field, to catch through these waves that Nick is describing. And there's a way in which what I'm noticing catching is like this movement towards translating it through to the next phase. Like I think Nick, you often point to that diagram that's, I think, in the Metamodern book. Do you remember what it's called? Just so you can reference it quickly. Yeah,
it's part of the Hanzai Freiheit. Yeah, it's called something like 5 stages of evolution.
Like, yeah, it's like artists catch it first, and then it's the philosophers, and then it kind of like trickles down more and more into systems and like politics and culture and all of that. And I know that we're right now kind of at an edge. Like Nick and I were talking about it earlier today when we met, that like you're starting to look at money and like financial sustainability models, that but from source. Like what are the blueprints that are beginning to emerge around new forms of economic models and resourcing models, and how are we embodying that in our fields now in this kind of like next phase of evolution and development. And I'm looking a lot right now at like organizational models, like as fields begin to cohere more and more of us find each other and we feel this eros, and it's like, yeah, there's potential here. But what happens when we need to actually source and make decisions, like concrete material decisions around incorporation and like building of structure, and beginning to essentially really architect from the blueprints, like architect and build from the blueprints that we're sourcing, and let it materialize and kind of enter these like real feedback loops with the real world, like what's working, what's not, how are we adapting and iterating. And then in the midst of that, still stay connected to source, because it's so easy to kind of get stuck back in the game A. It's like get stuck back into, oh, but it's easy to just like go back to the old model when you're trying to get shit done. But it's like, no, we need to completely embody it in relationship with source. So I think, yeah, something around translation of these blueprints, translation of the protocols, and then also kind of like not just through words, but through experience. Like we have to kind of live through that prototyping process now. So I guess my question is like, what do you sense is at that edge now, maybe kind of moving from even the artists deeper into other forms of protocols and systems?
Yeah. And just going to answer this in two parts. So one part is like this, and it sort of touches on the question also of what's the role of masculine source keeping, and so is I don't actually want to answer that question. I think what I want to say is something like this is, I think source keeping, when it gets more and more sophisticated, will be part of how to do it well. This new form that's emerging, this new capacity that's emerging on this edge of always trying to figure out how to do things for thousands of years, will be when we can get masculine and feminine energies balanced quite well, both in ourselves and also in teams of source keepers. Because I think, let's just forget gender politics for a minute. Let's forget bodies and all that just for a second, and let me just really simplify things down like that. Is, let's just say, if given enough guys, you can sort of build anything. You can build the pyramids. But if you just leave it to just the men, and often we'll build the wrong thing. We can build anything, but we often build the wrong thing. And women can sort of source into what's the right thing to build incredibly well, but then it never gets done. That's a massive generalization, but let me just say it. I mean, shadow on both sides. There's a problem on both sides that I think both genders combined wrestle with all the time. So it's like sense in, move. Sense in, is it still right? Move, act, move, make something, sense back in again like that, move, sense in like that. That's very Tao, sort of like that. And it requires both of those two things to be really balanced and not get into a power struggle and not go like this or like that. And we aren't there yet. We're not there yet. So I think, and until that's right, I don't think we can do anything. We can maybe make art, because how controversial can that be if we're just making stuff in a room like that? I mean, if we put it in a gallery, then it gets complicated and start charging for it, then those dynamics come back into play. But the minute you start to execute anything, all that stuff gets really messed. So it's like, I think the first edge of it is that really getting that right. And that's, when that's right, man, I just perceive so much potential in this possibility of constantly GPSing, and then but constantly moving with the right timing, but moving and not holding back and not spinning, and then poof, and then and I've been in situations where we've done that. I've been in that, and it's thrilling. It's absolutely thrilling. And the amount of progress you can make in terms of manifestation quickly and smoothly and creatively and beautifully and brilliantly and shockingly and powerfully and inspirationally is amazing. One day like that changes people's lives forever, because I've experienced it. So I think that's the first job for me. That's like, and that starts inside myself, and then in terms of my close relationships. And then I think it's moving now beyond just the purely like, let's make art from it like that, and it's starting to move into, I'm not totally sure if I'd call it philosophy, the next wave, but it's like, it's moving into the maybe prototyping phase of like, let's try and actually do something on a relatively small scale, and let's see what we run into. Because the problem is, when you come down into the denser frequencies of manifesting like that, is you can't single anything out. So everything is involved. As soon as you step out of ideas and into reality, everything is involved all at once. Governance, money, practicality, timing, deadlines, earth, sewage. It's like, woof, comes in like that. And so it's sort of, so you don't go big in the beginning. You don't like, let's build a town. You don't do that. You go like, why don't we start with a campsite for a week, and let's see if we can, or whatever it is that you want to build. It doesn't matter. You prototype it. So I think that's where I would say the next wave is just try little things. And these gatherings, I think, these gatherings that we did over the last year were actually part of that wave of let's try some stuff. And I think we learned the shit out of how hard that can be. And so I think here we all are embodying those learnings, and like we're the living blueprints, and we've got the scars to prove it. Some of us, more than others. It doesn't matter. It's okay. That's what it is. That's the blueprints stamped onto our hearts and somas and nervous systems. Okay, so yeah, it's always that way, isn't it? When you break new ground. That's it. The Wright brothers had a lot of scar tissue on them, you know? They crashed a lot of planes. Yeah. Stick down. I'm sorry, I just want to say one more thing as in that as well, and this may be controversial. I don't mean it to be. I think it's observationally also possibly true, although this may be a projection, is I do think it was right that for the last few years, there was a heavy dose of the sensing in the field, the inside of it. So, and that's right. So I think since 2020-ish, there was a lot of slow down, practice sensing, and you know, as a guy, like doing that has been really useful to be able to like build a sensing organ and or test out what even is that and do these practices, and it's been amazing. And a lot of like we're heading in the wrong direction and all the stuff we've been doing for the last 2 years, and I can feel the pendulum swinging the other way now, and people are a bit itchy now. I'm like, let's try some stuff, like, let's try it out. And I think now if we keep on sensing for another 2 years, I think everyone's going to start to, you know, eat each other's tails if we do that. I think people want to try and do stuff. It's swinging that way. I can feel it. So bid on a art gallery space in New York City. There's this organization that uses unused buildings in New York as art gallery spaces, and I bid on it. I put $1,000 of my own money down, and I won the bid. So I've got a gallery space in New York City to use for one whole month, anytime between now and a year from now. That was what I won in that lottery for $1,000. It's not very much money in New York on 37th Street and 8th Avenue. So that's my prototype one of my prototypes next year. Is I don't know what to do with that gallery, but it'd be interesting to do something intersubjective and impactful and to see whether or not we can make any kind of dent from a gallery space out into the streets of New York City. I don't know what that is, but that'll be interesting. That's a little prototype. I don't know. Like I'm going to maybe, you know, I'll put a notice out into the field, and when I've got, part of what I'm doing in Berlin is thinking about that. And I came here partly to just get creative inspiration for that and look at some interactive performance art spaces and stuff like that. But I'm interested in like, can we get I said last year I want to get arrested for something creative, you know, so it's sort of like, can we shut a street down in New York City? Can we, I'm thinking about flying Awapai, who's the shaman from the Amazon, over and having her in that space for a month, like doing creative rituals in that space, and passers by on the streets, like in New York City. It's a ground level, eye level, like a store level in New York. So there's a little experiment. I don't know what it will be yet, but we'll try something. See if we can get arrested, you know. That would be my challenge, is do something, get arrested for a good thing. See if we can do that.
One
I have
question. Oh, sorry.
Amanda, why don't you go?
It's because Nick has been this abundance source keeper for us. And I wanted to ask you, Nick, what is your experience of holding that, and how do you come back to your compass? What is your compass when you are holding that responsibility or power, or yeah.
Mm. Mm. Interesting. What comes up, it's interesting. I didn't expect this to be my answer, but I'll answer it. Is, you know, what comes up is my dad, you know, who died a couple of years ago. I mean, I knew all of you when he died. He died in 2021. Yeah, 21. And 22, actually, early 22. And anyway, he was a first generation immigrant into England, Pakistani guy like that, and difficult man in many ways. But as a kid, one of the things that he bequeathed me as a personality, which is amazing, really, is a gift, such a gift. The greatest thing he ever gave me was, if ever I dreamed anything as a kid, you know, or wanted to do anything, or had any vision for anything, that I wanted to try and do, he would always, I would doubt myself. I'd be like, no, I don't think I can do that. Or I'd have, if I had any self-doubt, he would always be like, sure you can, of course you can. Because you can do it. You can do anything. And he wasn't even saying, because you're so amazing, Nick. He was just saying, if you set your mind to it, you can do anything. Like that. He's like, just set your mind to it and you'll figure it out. Like, I mean, he never helped me. Don't say that. He never said, let me help you. He's just like, get on with it. Like, you can do it, like that. But something interesting about that is, I think my orientation point is, of course you can, which is my dad, actually. It's my dad's voice inside me. Good voice. I've got a good dad voice in that regard. And it's like, you want to do that? All right. It's $500,000. All right. Well, let's figure out how we get $500,000 then. Let's figure it out. I don't know. How are we going to do that? I don't know, but we can figure it out. Let's source it. Let's source how we do it. Can you source $500,000? Of course you can. You can source a book, or you can source a project, or you can source an idea, or you can source a movie. I mean, people watch movies and they're like, oh, that movie's channeled. It's like, if you channel a movie, you can channel $500,000. I'm sure. And it's like, wow. So it's like that. It's always like, if you start there, I think, then you're off to a good start. And then you just keep coming back to that, like, of course. And they don't hold it like this. Like, we will grit our fists and we will clench our toes and we will punch our way to $500,000, even if it kills us. I don't hold it like that. I'm like, hey, if the thing's right and the idea's right and it's good and it's Source wants it, then Source will fucking help us get money for it, because that's Source's job. Because Source is trying to make itself manifest. I don't think Source wants me to go bankrupt trying to manifest an art gallery. It's like, let's work out a way to do it. All right, we'll put in a bid on a lottery for a small amount of money, and then I'll help you win. So, it's like that. It's like, all right, that's how I feel about it. Like that. That's my orientation point. Abundance, and yes, you can, of course you can, and casually, held sort of lightly, and the money's not evil. It's like crazy. This whole thing is just like, it's just energy. Just, if you want to make something happen, if a good idea comes, it comes with ideas around how to capitalize it as well. It's like, it's all one flow, things are trying to come in. And you don't need to do awful shit to get money. You don't need to. It's like, people go quickly to like, that means I have to go work in a pizza restaurant for a year to raise that today. It's like, no, you don't. No, you don't. You don't need to do that. There's no way to do it. I was joking with Cheryl today. She should charge $400 an hour to be a source keeping consultant. I was like, I can sell that. I can sell that tomorrow. I know who'd buy that, who'd pay that. You might not want to work with them as clients, but I know who'd pay it. I can hook you up. Yeah, that's it. Stick down.
I actually don't have any questions, so for me, can open the space for others. So.
I just have one more question then, and it's a broader question, but I do also want to kind of orient it specifically a little bit more to men who feel like the potential of source keeping in their bodies, like that kind of calling. So something that I really, I see a gift in you, kind of like lived through in your very being, is kind of like this, you're like a spark that starts a fire. Like you're like and what I mean by that is that there's something very initiatory about your pattern, I guess, like the way of your being, that I think right now there's like something around that kind of initiatory first mover. Like, I feel the wave, but I'm not sure if I should say yes. Like, I think there's like a lot of people who are fearing failure right now, or who are feeling like that risk and that feat, like that, like, oh, if I'm the first mover, I will be criticized. I will put myself out on the line. I don't want to do that. So they're almost like I noticed that in myself as well. Like there's almost like I want someone else to figure it out so that I can follow them kind of thing. So we're all diagnosing the situation, we're all seeing the problems, but there's something a little bit stuck in the energy and in the field right now that is like usually very personal. It's like usually like I'm like that's scary. I don't want to do it. Like what if I can't, or what if I look stupid, or what if I do something wrong? And I think it's interesting, but there's like a way that like a woman kind of relates with her holdbacks that I think like Ria and Amanda and I have kind of been exploring with our source keeper interviews. But I'm also curious about how that's kind of expressed in like a male source keeper, like the body of a man. Like where does that what does it take to really be like, yes, like just to say like, yes, this is mine, I'm going to respond to this, this is mine to take, this is mine to like bring into the world, this is mine to guard and protect and to corral resources around, and then how to be in stay in integrity as like a male source keeper is working with that as well. I think I'm curious about that because I'm not in the body of a man.
I can only speak about my own experience. I don't know what it's like to be in anybody else's body, but I'll just give you a small example of my own noticing. Like say you decide you want to do something, like just put money aside for 1 second and whether or not you can afford it. But let's say you decide, I want to go to a foreign country for 2 weeks to do something, go to a gathering or whatever it's like. And I've got to get on a plane and book a ticket and book an Airbnb and everything like that. You'll notice, I think I notice in myself, there is a period of time when I'm excited about doing that. And then there's a period of time when I need to then do real actions to make it happen. Like click pay for an airplane ticket or click yes to a gathering thing or whatever. And fear rises in my body. And I disguise that fear as all kinds of things like maybe I won't go, or resistance, or like, oh, there'll be assholes, or like nobody's going to like me, or I cover my fear in a bunch of stuff. But really, if I investigate what is my resistance, it's fear. And then I know that it's that. And the image I always use is I'm not a surfer at all, but I know when you're a surfer, it's the hardest bit is getting through that choppy waves in the shallow part of the ocean. And then once you get beyond that, you have to dive under them, and then you get past it, and then you can surf the big waves. And I'm always like, yeah, it's just the choppy waves. It's the choppy waves. Just get under the water and just do it. Come out the other side like that. And so I always have to like take a deep breath and say, I'm afraid to do this. I don't know why I'm even afraid, because it's action and decision. And so I'm just going to go, fuck it, like that. I sort of have a fuck it button and I just go, all right, fuck it. What's the worst that can happen? I might be dead tomorrow. It doesn't matter, like. And I find a way of going through those steps that are real decision points, real world decisions, and then just keep going like that. And so that's my noticing of what's in the way is fear, which I often hide from myself because of shame and cover with all kinds of things that sound very reasonable to me in my own head, but are really just fear in disguise. And I go through it by just being like, okay, I'm afraid, and it's like feel the fear, but do it anyway, I suppose, or whatever. And then the third thing I'll say, you asked me also, like, what do you do about it? Is maybe controversial, but it's just my experiences. Having good, I think, friends, but really female friends, actually, has really helped me with that. It's something about talking to somebody who's in the same space. Like you're a good example, Cheryl, of this. It's like, if I come to you around wanting to do something, weekly, and I'm like, I'm nervous about it, or I don't think how, like, whatever, you're very supportive, and you'll be very, like, you'll hold space, you'll listen, you'll be supportive, feedback, like, and I trust you. And it's like, it's powerful that when you're up against something, like somebody else, I think something about the opposite gender or something, I don't know exactly. For me, maybe that's the case because I've got such terrible mothering or something, it's just so healing and helpful. And there's something for me about a woman being like, that's great. I think that's great. I think that's awesome, Nick. Like, that sounds really interesting and exciting. It's like, then I'm like, oh yeah, well, okay, cool. Well, then I'll do it then. And it sounds cool. Like that. It's like, it's a little schoolyard. It's like, I kind of trick myself into being cool about it, whatever. I just like that, you know, it's just very human. It's like, all right, if she likes it, I guess it's good. It's like that, you know, I guess it's cool. Cheryl thinks it's cool, it's cool. Something like that.
Okay, so I think we might open. Charlie has a question. So I want to invite everyone to open their cameras. If you don't mind being on YouTube, if you don't want to be on YouTube, please don't show your beautiful face. And if you want me to read your question also, I can do that. Charlie.
Thank you. Thanks, Nick, for doing this, and thanks, Amanda. Thanks, Cheryl. Thanks, Rhea. Thanks, Bestoa. Thanks, Participation Mystique, which I didn't know about, and the Nordic women, and everything else that led us all here. The thing that came up for me, and I really appreciate everything that you offered, Nick, is how like granular your particular vision of source keeping seems to be as compared to what I've heard so far. And I haven't tuned in to every single one of these events, but I've been involved in several and tuned in. And what I mean to say is that until I heard you start speaking this today, Nick, I didn't really appreciate the sort of specificity as like a source that's aligned with a specific project and an idea that might be wanting to come through. It was more abstract, meta, sort of cloud-based, not technology-wise, but in a more of a vague sort of unitary way, right? I was hearing, I think so far, all of the others that we've heard on source keeping have been women, and I don't know whether this has a relation to the masculine or feminine at all, but I'm just curious as to, and maybe I'm asking for feedback from other folks in addition to Nick, but I'd love to hear what you have to say too about this. And you did seem to touch on it in terms of, you know, the sort of greater source, which is not aligned with a specific idea or project. Sorry, that's not much of a question, but that's all I got.
Again, as I've said, I've been used to saying this recently, is I'm not a philosopher, I'm a producer, just to qualify it. I don't know philosophy or metaphysics, but I mean, I don't know what God is, I've got no idea. But it seems to me like, let's say there's a big bang, I don't know what, and everything comes out of that, right? And it's like everything, right down to a chicken's feather, to a galaxy, you know. So it's like, isn't everything coming from source? So it's like that. So it's like, but something's happening that's making a chicken and a chicken's feather as well, that's going like this. There's convergence like that. There's divergence like that. Big bang, and then there's this. And so it's like, I feel like it needs both. I feel like that's the movement of the universe. Everything goes out and then goes in like that and becomes something specific. Like you can't abstractly think about painting a painting forever. Eventually you can for a while. You can open yourself to the universe, and artists do that for sometimes years at a time, but eventually they make something that somebody else can look at. Even if it's just Marina Abramovich sitting for 90 days in silence, she's doing something, not nothing. She's not just, so it's something, the somethingness piece of it. So I think it's both, actually. I think it's like this, and then that's all of it. Kind of, and the broader you can reach out like that into the all of it, I think women, my experience, are dropping into the mystery, and their capacity to go deep and wide into that open space of the cosmic is amazing. What Cheryl just said to me about spark like that is, I have the opposite experience of her, which is this capacity to go this out into the blackness of everything, the magical sort of sparkling blackness of the cosmos. I'm like, fucking hell, you know, like being close to that and sensing into it. It's just remarkable for a man to feel that, you know. It's just like, oh wow. And then there's another movement which is like that, and that's got a whole other thing. It comes in like that, and that's going the other way like that, and then it goes out again. I don't know if that answers the question, but that's how I perceive it, and the different things. Like in participation mystique, I mean, this is a joke, but almost true. It's like we were sourcing what kind of candy bars to buy when we were on that retreat. I mean, everything was we were so lined in like this, and we were so like, the frequency was so coherent. We'd just be like, boom, 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 gummy bears, da, 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 and we just knew. And everyone came back from the supermarket, and everyone's like, "How do you know what candy to buy?" We're like, "We just knew, we knew." It was like that. Everything was like that. It was like, we just knew. We knew steaks. We're gonna have steaks tonight. And everyone's like, "Yeah, I wanted meat." Yeah, we knew. In the supermarket, we picked it up. It was like, it was super like that. It wasn't like that. It was like this. It's a really interesting movement.
Charlie, could you repeat your question? What was the question exactly?
It just, if it was only a question, it's a sort of trying to open myself up to what's a new idea for me after hearing Nick speak about source keeping as potentially aligned with a specific idea and project versus what I've heard in the previous source keeping sessions with you and Cheryl and Ria about it feeling more ephemeral. And as Nick says, you know, the whole universe, the Big Bang, right? And I guess, you know, I'll go on to say that what Nick responded with is sort of resonant for me, in that I only seem to have the capacity to pick out specific things, but I pick too many of them and they all seem to be entangled with each other. Anyhow, that's probably not clarification. Sorry.
Oh, I think I got it. Yeah, I think I want to add to that as well, because um, I've only started these interviews because I've been through the process of creating something very specific, which was the gathering in Brazil. And through this process of leading this project, hosting it, and source keeping, I started questioning myself, what are the capacities that we are developing here, not just myself, but everyone, that for us to really, like Nick said, commit to something that is bigger than us and might kill us, uh, in like, not in a literal way, but metaphorically. So then I chose Ria, Cheryl, because I knew that they were source keeping something. Like Ria source keeping collective presencing, Cheryl source keeping participation mistake, and Nick has been in all this with us. So, and I also want to, I see also that everyone can, well, you are at least the source keeper of your own life. Like, you have to make decisions about your life. And if you want to draw these decisions from source, you might be source keeping your life. Like, your life is your movie, it's your script, it's your creation. So yeah, peace back. Any other questions to Nick?
I would like to invite you to talk a bit about the question that Sam has put in the chat about how we might support others in stewarding their call, their sourced calls. I guess you have some experience with that as well.
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. I want to answer it top down and bottom up. So there's an answer to that question that starts like this, which is, if a source keeper comes to you and asks you for your help as a co-host or as a member of a team or even as a participant in something they want to do, that's coming this way. They're saying, I've sensed into the source, and the source, as far as I'm concerned, is asking me to assemble this team, this group of people around this project, and you're one of them. And I want you to help me in this way, or maybe just generally like that. There's this way. And then there's, if you as an individual feel that you've got a calling to help that person, and they're not inviting that. Not because they're keeping you out, but because it just hasn't happened yet. And you're looking at what they're doing and you're thinking, I'd like to help them do that. I'd like to help them. And so I think it's the same. Whether you're going this way, I'm saying practically it can happen one of those two ways. There's two ways. But in either way, it's happening like that. I think it's really important that the alignment is right. The person asking wants you to help them. You want to help them. The thing they're asking you to help with is a thing you want to do, that you can do, that you feel comfortable doing, is the thing you want to do for them. The thing that they want from you isn't different. The thing you're offering them is that it's like, I think there's talk really carefully and long and really with no shame or agenda about if there's alignment between in what one could describe as the helping relationship, and make sure it's there. Really make sure and keep sensing into that. And if it doesn't matter if it's there, great. If it starts, and if it falls out of alignment at any point along the way, nothing's wrong, but just notice it and then see if it can be brought back into alignment, or the collaboration's over. And that's okay as well, like that. But stay in alignment like that, or as much as you possibly can. It can waver, but just keep checking it like that. And especially at the beginning, it's usually as in the beginning, so in the end. But I think we don't spend enough time. It's like, oh, somebody wants to help me for free, great. Or like, I've been asked to help. Of course I have to help, like that. And I made all those mistakes, and both ways, asker, receiver, giver. And I've been in all different positions around that, like that. And so I think consider that they're asking you to marry them. Think about it that hard. Depending on how central that position of helping is, consider it's a marriage proposal and think about it that hard, I would say, both of you. Because that's what you're doing in a way. It's a creative marriage.
Yeah, that's to do with what we spoke about this morning, Nick, about that 90% or the 99% and the 100%. Maybe you could add that in.
Yeah, it's something we've all, I mean, a lot of us have heard each other say this, but something that Rhea and I really got into, over the last year, about like even 99.5% yes is still no. And just been really, really like almost ruthless is not a word I like to use, but fearless in one's capacity to say it's still not yes, because I'm only 99.5%. And really staying, really, when it comes to these things that are so, where alignment is important. Also, I think I was going to say something else about roles. Yeah. Also, it's not a negotiation exactly, but you can role shift as well inside of all that. It's very fluid. They're very fluid, these things, and so it can be like, Cheryl was asking me to do one thing. And then in the middle, as we moved into PM like that, it's like, oh, money becomes an issue. Nick, do you want to hold that? It's like, okay, well, I can. And I've got two roles like that. And then it's like, okay. And now we have a different relationship in those two roles like that. But keeping it all like looking at all of it, like it's all alive. And it's just making sure it's like consciousness around it rather than just being like, okay, so easy to do that. It's so easy to just go, okay, like that. And then 6 weeks later, you're like, why is this exploding around me? I don't understand. It's like, well, because all these questions are still open around us, like you're not really clear about it. Stick there.
I have a question. So I've been taking all of this in, and there's so much dense information that I've been absorbing, and it feels really great. There's so much that's been resonating in me. And my question, which comes from a lighter space, is what's the most fun part for you? Where do you get most excited in the process of source keeping?
I'll just, again, it's based on a limited experience set. So I'm not saying this is the answer. I'm just saying this is my experience with it. Probably half a dozen times in these gatherings that we did over the summer, and also projects that weren't gatherings, probably half a dozen times max, everything clicked into place. And we were truly in a coherent, emergent movement. And we knew it. One example of that was so thrilling was we were in Brazil, and Amanda talked about it in her interview. And we had I had a very difficult beginning of that retreat, and lots of things were contracting in me and stuff like that. And then suddenly the sort of field opened, and we did this tree planting thing, which is I'm not a tree planting, look at me, I'm not a tree planting guy, right? I mean, but something happened, and we knew, like, we're in it, and we all knew it at the same time. And it was magic. It was so fucking magical, and like, what could you say? It was like transcendent, but not in a love and light kind of way. It was like, it's hard to put words on it. Flow state, group flow state. It's like sexual without any sexuality. It's orgasmic without any sexuality. It's like group orgasmic energy without any sexual overtone. Clean. You just tuned in, and you're aligned, and you feel whole, and you feel home, and you feel like that. And we all came out of it, and we were like, wow. Like, it was worth 4 days of agony just to get that 1 hour. It's like surfing. You hit the big wave, and you're like, that's why I do it. That's it. There it is. It's like, wow. And you're alive, and you're part of the whole thing, and it's amazing. It's amazing. I think yeah, I mean, that's sort of peak experiences in a way. And you're seeing through the eyes of a group consciousness, not an individual consciousness, but you're not losing yourself. So your consciousness is so expansive, and you're seeing in so many dimensions at once, and you're seeing so many new aspects of aliveness, and it's amazing. But it's not culty. It's not suspicious. It doesn't have that quality. It's very authentic. And I mean, I'm very cynical. I live in Brooklyn. It's not like a church experience. It's really interesting, mysterious. Yeah, that's my answer to that. I'll remember some of those experiences. I know I will take them to the grave with me. I know when I'm 90 and I'm talking to my grandkids and they ask me about that, I'll be able to recall some of those experiences and say, blow for blow, what happened, and pull it up in my body. I don't know what they are, but and I believe that Atlantis was a society that lived like that all the time. And it somehow got tipped out of alignment because of masculine and feminine polarity, got out of alignment. And that's why it sank, metaphorically or literally. I don't know. I'm not a mystical guy like that. But I believe that's possible. And I believe humans have gone through those capacity shifts high, and then they've crashed like that many times over the millions of years that we've been around. Seems to me. This is ancient and new every time.
I have another question. If you have energy for it, Nick. Because Jenna and Sam, they asked about this role of being the supporter and holding space for the person who is in that very delicate position, which is I think some people refer to that as this proximity to source is actually very vulnerable, and I resonate with it. So I wonder if you yourself, when you were the initiator and you were the leader of something, did you feel like that vulnerability? How was it like? And because I remember in the, I think it was creative presencing for leaders. I was not there yet in this field, but I'll be curious to know also your experience being the main caller and initiator or something, and how was that for you also?
Mm. And again, like I wrote about Berlin, I've got a 140-page document that I wrote about that experience, if anybody's interested in that as well. My experiences doing that. Yeah, it's vulnerable. Yeah, it's vulnerable. It's extremely vulnerable. And I did that early, it was early. It was before the Belgium gathering. I did it in late 2001. And also my dad died in the middle of that project, and all kinds of things happened. One of my family members had a terrible accident. So it was a very complicated moment in my life. But one version of what's happening when you initiate something like a field or a gathering or something like that, one of many things are happening, but one thing that's happening, I think, in my experiences, is you, the source keeper, are putting yourself into some kind of a initiatory experience from which you will emerge as a different person. So it's going to stretch your capacity for containment in all the ways where it's limited, because the universe is trying to make you a bigger and bigger channel to bring stuff in through, just as because you're open to that. And so it's going to blow away anything that's in the way. It doesn't care, in a way. The universe is sort of just interested in coming through consciousnesses. So to the individual ego, it looks like, it can feel like, wow, I'm being torn apart in this experience so that I can be a bigger container, rebuilt as a larger container. So any restrictions in my containment capacity for myself or for the group or for the project, is the project's trying to push that wider and wider to get more through like that. So it's stretching you like that. In a way, you need to be stretched. But the feeling of that, it can be quite painful. And I couldn't hold it. I was too early. I did that project too early in my development as a space holder. I'm not. I think I'm still too early. Actually, I don't think I'll do it now again, that project. But I put a lot of high frequency people into something, and it went wrong after about 3 sessions or 5 sessions or something. And so I shut the field down. I took the initiative, and I was like, I don't feel qualified to hold this, and so I'm going to close it and not go any further, because I can't be responsible for what's going to happen to anybody in this field, including me. It's a very vulnerable position. It's extremely vulnerable. Yeah, it's one of the most vulnerable positions I've ever put myself in my life. Like, and I've led some quite complicated things that are quite visible, like in my life, with a lot of people involved in public profile, and I felt more vulnerable in that than I felt in a lot of those spaces. And so Ria and I have talked about this after Belgium. It's like, picking your team when you do something big like that. Picking your team, you're picking people that really have got to have your back. I mean, you've got to really help each other out. It's really important that you trust each other, and you can really, what the hosting team's like. The hosting team of something big is really, it's a tricky environment. You've got to really have each other's backs, I think, really, in a major way. Almost no matter what's happening in the field, you've got to hold on to each other in those environments. You've really got to. And you got to trust each other, and it's like, you got to pick people that you really trust and can really rely on and stuff like that, because it is so bloody vulnerable. I've likened it to picking a squad of 3 or 4 people to climb Everest with. Like, once you get above 20,000 feet, you're in a death zone together, and if one of you falls, you all fall, and it's like you're roped together, and it's tough. It's tough, and you go through stuff. Yeah. It's intense. And again, it's like picking a marriage. I mean, you're sort of picking the people with whom you are going to go through something difficult with. So you're not picking people that because they've got a good haircut or because you like the way that they use big words. You're like, when the shit hits the fan, can I rely on this person? Like, and they got my back. That's what you're picking, really, because it's going to hit the fan. It may. And then, it's like, that's who you pick when you're in a marriage, right? Same thing. Just say one more thing about that, and just so I don't sound like I've got all the answers. I mean, and in that capacity of being in that supportive role, many times I failed as many times as I succeeded in doing that in a support function, and I'm okay with that because, as I say, we fail forward, we're failing together, and that's how we learn. And that's just life, You can't make an omelet without breaking eggs. You just can't do it. There's no way. That is a recipe for inaction. I mean, we're signing up to fail together. That's what we're doing. It's not failure. It's not failure. It's not. It's stepping stones. It's just, it feels like failure, and we're programmed to think it's failure and to feel shame and self-hatred and turn on each other. But it's not what it is. It's not what it is. It's fierce grace,
Yeah, I want to share that there's something, it feels like very roiling and alive in my body around like this question of how to truly be in support of someone else's, like another person's connection with source when they're keeping. And I think that mutuality is so critical, because we've been kind of talking a lot about what it means to be like you're a source keeper, like to know your own connection to source, and then to say yes, and then to find the right people, but to really focus on like, what is it like for the people who say yes to supporting you? And that kind of like, and for me to really acknowledge, like Nick said yes, like Nathan said yes. And I'm not paying anyone here. Like there's like a way in which something about that relationship. So the reason why it's also coming up for me is I'm now to some extent like I want to co-host other people's work. I notice actually like a desire. There's sort of like a phase change where I've done enough of, I kind of know my call to some extent. So now I want to support the calls of others, and knowing how to effectively support that person's relationship with source as a co-host and as a co-facilitator. Like I keep going back to Nick as an example in my mind. Like I keep going back to, oh, what would Nick do in this situation? Like what would Nick, because like a lot of the time, there's like so much shadow that can happen in relating with someone who's stepping into a position of like vulnerable leadership and first mover. It's like really easy. I notice all of this shadow projection that can happen that's very critical. It's like, why is this person doing it this way? Or I would do it better, that kind of thing. But that's really not what is like being asked for in that position. It's actually like deep support, like, and also integrity with what is true. Like if I feel something a little bit off, like it's my responsibility to name it and not hold it back because I'm afraid of, making them sad or something like that. But also there is something around like, yeah, it's you're in service to that relationship. You're in service to like that which is coming through them. So we're all there. Yeah, there's like something around, there's some sensing into what Nick was describing around alignment. Like alignment with source when you're a source keeper, and alignment with source when you're saying yes to co-hosting with another source keeper. There's, no matter what, it's always an alignment. Yeah, and there's a whole art also to that I'm at my own edge of learning.
Yeah, I mean, let's say in the case of, just picking on Cheryl and Amanda, it's like I'm 57. I'm 20, 30 years older than these two. I'm a man. I've worked in game A for 30 years. Like, what it took sometimes for me not to take over or try and take over, and to be like, okay, that if they want to do it like that, then I guess they're the source keeper. Yet still quite not give away my integrity completely and just be like, whatever you want, I'll support you in that. And I'm not a sort of, whatever it is, whatever that would be, like a blind, just muscle. I'm not a bouncer, it's just like, clear the way, here comes the king, here comes the queen, it's not like that. It's and not feel like power's been exercised over me if I get overridden because something I sense. It's like, no, Nick, I think my sensings of source is clearer than yours on this issue. And to really feel into that, like, yeah, you're right, and not feel like that's a power struggle. And that's complicated. That is complicated internally. That's very complicated internally. And to not get into not to get into bouncer, not to get into a fight about that, and especially when the frequency, because it's one thing to talk about these things like here on Zoom in this controlled environment. All our systems are regulated, I think, mostly right now. But man, when you get into a container with a bunch of other people in person and the frequency goes high like that, everything gets distorted through everybody's projections and everybody's trauma gets activated. And so you're trying to, it's not only trying to like climb Everest, it's like trying to climb Everest in a storm. And the storm's inside you. And so trying to see clearly and not go into your old patterns like that when you're in those, when it's going like that and there's turbulence, it's really difficult. It's extremely difficult. It can be at times. And I've been through that in these experiences. I'll say one other thing about supporting source keepers. I think I'm very glad that I had gone through my experience trying to source keep something and failing with creative presencing for leaders and closing it down before I became a co-host to somebody else trying to do that. I think I would have had a different relationship to that role had I not tried it myself. I think you become a much better co-host to support somebody once you try to host something yourself and you know what it's like to be in that chair. It's extremely difficult to sit in the co-host chair in a very difficult circumstance and really be supportive if you haven't sat where they've sat. It's very difficult because you don't know what it's like to sit there till you do it. It's difficult. It's like trying to advise somebody about swimming if you've never got in the water. It's difficult. It's like you can be reading from a textbook about how to swim, but when someone's drowning, it helps if you actually know how to swim, sort of thing. I can see that Amanda likes that analogy.
One thing that's coming up for me, it's funny you mentioned the Mount Everest because I was watching that documentary, 14 Peaks. I don't know if you, so it's this guy who climbs the 14 highest peaks on Earth in, I think it's 7 months or something. And he chooses his team also. He has a team that really is everything. And he mentions at points like when he was really tired or thinking of giving up, always maintaining some degree of positivity of saying, no, it's gonna work, we're gonna make it, or just being like the hero, really. And what I see in source keeping is that in my experience and just seeing others is actually a little bit of the opposite. In a way, it's actually saying, hey, I'm really tired. Hey, I don't know what I'm doing. Hey, I don't know if we should keep going. Hey, I'm stressed out. I'm dying. I don't know. It's just revealing that, like, this falling apart and of the psyche who is just, yeah. So I wonder what it is for us to learn. I think there's a collective learning with that we don't need to depend on a hero. And we, in that points, in those moments where like the leader is falling apart, we, oh, maybe I can also step up, or oh, maybe I can be supportive, or maybe I need another source of confidence or trust within myself that is not projected on a leader. So I wonder what you, yeah, if you think something of that, or anyone else.
Yeah, I think that cycle that Nick was naming about sensing, move, sensing, move, that kind of, I would say, the frequency of that wave can become compactor, if that's the right, more compact, like with not but like it's getting more like almost like an I don't know how to say that, like feeling it in all our bodies, like, oh, this is the move, okay, and then do the move and do this one step and then sense again. I think that needs to be more, I don't know how to say it.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be really interesting. I don't know how to do this, and I don't really know. Well, I'll just say it. It'd be really interesting to practice that. I mean, I think that's just what Rhea just described as a compacted sense move. I joked a long time ago in CP about, like, let's decide how to paint one wall in Rhea's house. Who paints it? What color? How do we decide? Who buys the paint? Who does it? How do we do it? You know, like that. I was like, let's see if we can do it. Let's see if we can make that simple decision. How do we raise the money? It's $5.66. How do we do it? Yeah, and just let's see what happens. So I think, like, let's practice around, like, let's try stuff, like let's try little things, and let's, you know, it's kind of simple when I say it like that. Maybe simplify, but even pick, you know, they say in Buddhism, like, start with small things. You know, start with, yeah, learning to work with money. Start with $5. Don't start with 5 million. You know, it's like just kind of like try it and see what that feels like. Just low stakes things, so that when the stakes get higher, you get more of a sense of, like, oh, that's what it feels like to go like that, and then move. Yeah. Something like that. Practice. Like, these things require a lot of practice. That's what's shocking to me when I came into CP. It's like, I thought, oh, because I've got decent sensing capacity because of who I am as a person, I can just come in and do CP. And that's like, oh shit, it's like learning to surf. I've never surfed before. It's like, it's going to take a few years to be able to get up on a surfboard and stay on it. You know, like that. It's like, it's hard. It's really hard. Any of the stuff, it's just practice, you know, falling off a million times.
I think there's a question coming through here. It feels like you're a good person to ask because I'm reading from your apartment. I'm in your apartment right now. Art is everywhere. You know, I've known this about you for a while. You're a very artistically prolific individual, which means you take the leap from creative idea to instantiating that idea into something concrete very regularly. Something that I think's been rightly pointed out, I think Cheryl spoke about it, right, is I want to get, like, fine-grained about the varieties of reticence that keep us stuck in the circle of, not stuck, but keep us lingering in the circle of presence, and too hesitant to step into the circle of creation. Cheryl rightly named, there are social relational fears. What if other people judge me? What if it's not good enough? What if I fail? And what are the ramifications in terms of how I'm seen? But there's a subtle one that I often feel, and I want to presencing to creation is sourcing potential is an opening. Potential is indeterminate. There are many things that can be crystallized out of potential. And yet, when we're sensing potential, we're trying to sense the particular contours and then do something specific that falls within the range of constrained infinitude that we're sensing into. In some ways it's infinite, but in some ways it has, I like to call it, like, it has an angelic pattern. Now, this is hard because in making the leap into creation, there's a sense of like, sometimes it feels like the reticence can be the fear of doing something that's out of alignment, of like doing something that mutilates or dishonors the potential, by creating something that's not actually hearkening to source, what's wanting to come through. And yeah, this is a hard question. I have no idea how to answer it, but I'm really curious about your thoughts about like what it feels like because you're such an initiatory person, because you get the ball rolling so often, you really carry that energetic signature. It's like, I guess the subtleties of feeling that what you're doing is in alignment when you make that move. Like when you're sensing something, you're like, here we go, I'm doing something. And when you feel you're not feeling reticent, right? You're not because you're worried about other people, because you're not worried about harming source or dishonoring or mutilating the honest signature of what's wanting to come through. You're confident that you're moving within the channels of relevant. I'm curious if you have any felt sense of what that feels like, if that feels articulable to you. Yeah.
I understand the question. Yeah. And again, I really appreciate all the questions, and any answers that I'm giving, I'm just trying to say just from any experience that I've got, but I don't say that this is right or true for everybody. It's just really, it's like, and I don't have tons of experience, and I come from a different world. So I think two things come up when you're asked that. The first is I tend to operate on a fundamental assumption that I'll be right about half the time, that my initiatory impulse is from some kind of alignment, and half the time I get it wrong. So I start with that premise, and I don't know which half it is. I think they're all right, but then in retrospect, when I look back, I'm like, oh, that was a good call, that was a bad one, like that. So I have to just, the odds to me are like 50-50 of getting it right. So I kind of relax a bit, because I'm like, I'm probably going to get it wrong half the time. This might be one of those times, but it doesn't feel that way. Gives me a bit more permission to act. It's like, and sort of how bad can it be? I mean, pretty bad, but it's, yeah. And then alignment for me, there's two things that I use as, I think Cheryl said biomarkers today, which I thought was great. Biomarkers of alignment. That's a good phrase. One is when I wake up first thing in the morning, first open my eyes, my head is usually really quiet when I first open my eyes. I don't wake up with a busy mind. I wake up real quiet. And it's in that quietness, it's a brief period. It's like 10 seconds. Sometimes I'm like, yes, like that. And it's usually in those 10 seconds when I can feel it. And then it's because I'm so clear and there's so little noise, I'm like that, one. And the other one is, there's a way in which I can see it. I've got quite an active imagination, so I can see a lot of different things in my imagination. But sometimes I see certain things as if they were real in my mind's eye. And when that happens, I'm also like it's already in existence. And when there's a quality of that way of seeing something imaginatively that's different from just other imaginations. That's like, shit, it already exists, like that. It's got that quality. Like I can smell it. I've been there. It's almost like that. So it's almost from the future. And it's those two. It's like the morning 10 seconds and I can see it like it already exists. Usually if I get both those two signals, I'm like, okay, that's probably a good bet. But again, I may be wrong half the time still, even with those two signals. I am wrong half the time, and I'm okay with that. And sometimes people get hurt in my wrongness, but I'm not doing it on purpose. I'm not trying to hurt anybody. I'm trying to move things forward. And so sometimes there's collateral damage. And I think that's life, including me. But as long as my intentions are good and my actions are clean, I'm not doing it with malice. I'm not trying to hurt anybody. Sometimes shit goes wrong. I mean, that's life. You can run somebody over in a car by mistake. I mean, that's just life, isn't it? And you don't mean to, just shit happens. Otherwise, if I start getting too nuts about it, I can get perfectionistic. If I get too nuts about it, I don't do anything. You know. And then what good am I? Not what good am I, but it's sort of like then I'm annoyed at myself for a whole different set of reasons. You know, it's like pick your poison.
I'm feeling a lot of love right now. Listening to you, Nick. I feel moved. Yeah. Yeah, I think this ability to drop perfectionism is really, really helped me. When you were supporting me, it was key. Yeah, like there's some sort of relaxation that you bring with also with humor, which is always a good medicine for me. And I think for many women who want to be in a initiatory position and think that they need to be perfect and to be a good leader. So I think, yeah, I'm really moved by that actually. So it was being that experience with you. It was some people say that healing is experiencing the opposite. So having like a man who's older than me validating my leadership was experiencing the opposite of all my work experiences in the past, where I was never validated by an older man. I was always questioned or criticized. So yeah, I don't know. I just felt moved to share that. So I think it also ending this interview with, do you want to share last thoughts or?
Yeah, I do actually. Thank you. I do. Thanks for saying that as well. It's like we're all, every human, we're all amazing. We're all fucked up and all kinds of things, but what amazing things we are, like amazing. What amazing possibilities we hold. It's just amazing what's inside a person. And the more you know somebody, the more it blows your mind, doesn't it? The better you get to know somebody. When you're in an intimate relationship, you don't know somebody well and you get closer and you're just like, wow, you're like a whole wonderland. It's like that. Everyone's like that. It's just like, I just want to say, like, build your theme park, like fucking get it out. Sing your song, get it out. Like, you might be dead next week. Sing it. Oh, why the fuck not? What are we waiting for? What are we waiting for? I mean, really, what are we waiting for? For the world to end? So we can say, told you so? I mean, may as well go down laughing or, feeling good about what we're doing. It's really, I mean, really. If not now, when? If not you, who? It's really so true that it's like all of us. I mean, that you're sitting here on a Tuesday afternoon, it's just like well, that's why we're here, right? I mean, really, it's just like because we can feel it. We can all feel it. All of us in these spaces, we can feel like I got something to do here. It's like I'm here for a reason. God doesn't make junk. We're all here to do something. It doesn't have to be like SpaceX. It can be small, but it means something.
Applause.
Sing your song.
Like Peter
The
Lindbergh.
one only you can sing. The one only you can sing.
Thank you, Nick. Thanks, everyone. He's gone? Disappeared?
Bye bye. Bye bye.
Bye bye. Thanks, everyone. See you soon.